One of the dirty secrets of a data visualization platform like Tableau is that so much of what makes the best visualization so cool and interesting and sleek is that there's some really uncool, like unsleek, like nitty gritty stuff going on underneath that's powering the whole visualization. Like the thing that's tying all of these pieces together, that's allowing you to do all this cool stuff, is like really basic, fundamental stuff that doesn't seem like it would be that useful or that powerful. Tableau is just such a case in point that um, the groundwork really it's like all about the foundation. You can, without the right foundation, the house is not going to look very good, regardless of what how many bells and whistles and how many features you try to put on it. If the foundation is not solid, you're not going to have a good time. So in this particular series of videos, we're going to be talking about data organization. And by that, we don't mean the data itself. It's like you've been given a data set. What do you do with that? How do you organize it conceptually and in Tableau to maximize your chances of making something good? And then how do we use that organization to perform advanced calculations? So the big idea is that we've seen that level of detail is super important, but often in visualizations, we want to be able to move between levels of detail that may have perhaps were not specified in the original data set. So for instance, maybe we want the user to be able to define new groupings on the fly, or we want to be able to construct a hierarchy of products, product classes, product categories, product subcategories, and product SKUs, and those fields were all provided in the data set, but that the hierarchy wasn't necessarily specified, and we can do that ourselves. These new groupings can be either static, like the hierarchy, for instance, or flexible in the sense that we're allowing the user to change them over time. But again, ultimately, we're trying to use these things both to, as we'll see later in the course, drive actions and things like dashboards. So meaning using things like sets and hierarchies and groups to tie various pieces of visualizations together in Tableau to make them more compelling and interactive. But then also things like parameters to kind of knit different pieces of various visualizations together. And again, it's awfully difficult to discuss these things without examples, which we'll get to for sure. So the big goals this week, or this group of videos, we need to define and distinguish the three big organizational templates in Tableau, namely hierarchies, groups, and sets. They are similar, they are related, and they are distinct. So we need to be able to kind of flesh out in a particular situation, should we be using a hierarchy, a group, or a set. We need to be able to make these things, and we need to integrate them into visualizations in compelling ways. The next big piece of machinery that we need to identify and leverage is parameters. So these are fixed values. You can kind of think of them as constants in a programming language. And then, of course, I kind of walk that back immediately. They're like tunable constants. They're like changing constants, which means they're not constant at all. But they are in any visualization at any given time, fixed values that we can use to drive various behaviors as we see fit. And then we're ultimately going to use all of these things like groups and hierarchies and sets and things to define some interesting and more complicated level of detail expressions, more detailed and complicated than the previous ones we've used. And in particular, we're going to introduce the three big families there, three members in the family: fixed, include, and exclude, to make sure that the computations we're performing are happening at the correct level of detail regardless of what's going on in the view. And then finally, we'll introduce how to do things like case statements and control flow, if then else type stuff in Tableau. All of these are getting us to the point where we can really make some powerful visualizations, and we will get to that. And again, I know it can be frustrating, and of course, to be doing a lot of kind of foundational stuff so early. But what I found teaching this stuff over and over again is that the biggest mistake you can make in Tableau, in my personal opinion, is going too quickly into the dashboards and things like that, because like yes, it's easy enough to make them, but then you're kind of stuck, and you're stuck and frustrated. So this is a deliberate goal, a deliberate strategy to kind of layer these things on slowly, so that when we do make that dashboard, it is like seriously world-class dashboard, as opposed to making a kind of pretty bad dashboard and then not knowing what to do to fix it, or not knowing what to do to improve it. So in my opinion, honestly, in terms of making strong visualizations, today's lesson or this week's lesson or this series of videos is one of the most important, to be perfectly honest. Like, it was something that I didn't really appreciate for several years in teaching Tableau, namely just how important parameters are. Parameters and sets, if we're being perfectly honest with ourselves. Level of detail expressions, I think everyone recognizes are super important. And conditional logic, same thing with case statements and if then else. But the real power, the real power of Tableau, like, and you can take this one to the bank, it's that important, is parameters. Parameters and sets are the most important thing. And so this week we're going to kind of get those ones under our belt. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for all of this and more on this week's videos.